She grew up in a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and life moved slowly. The streets were lined with small shops, the kind where the owner greeted every customer by name, and children played freely in the open fields after school. She was one of those people who seemed ordinary at first glance, simple in her ways, soft-spoken and unassuming. She never sought attention or praise. People around her often underestimated her, thinking she was just like anyone else, following the rhythm of life without big dreams or ambitions. But inside, she carried a fire that few could see. A fire for something she had loved since she was a little girl, the sky. From the earliest days she could remember, she was fascinated by planes. Whenever she saw a jet cutting through the clouds, her heart raced. It wasn't just the speed or the sound. It was the freedom, the power, the feeling of being above everything. Her father worked at a small workshop fixing machines, and though he was practical and cautious, he supported her curiosity. He would take her to air shows whenever he could, letting her watch planes loop and twist in the sky. She would press her face against the chain-link fence, eyes wide, imagining herself inside the cockpit, steering the massive machines with skill and confidence. Those moments planted a dream that grew quietly but steadily with each passing year. School life was simple, predictable. She did her best to get good grades, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she knew she needed every tool possible to reach her dream. She read books about aviation, studied maps, and learned about the mechanics of planes. When other girls in her town were focused on fashion or social events, she would be sketching airplanes in her notebook, labeling every part she had memorized. Teachers noticed her dedication but often shrugged it off. "It's good to have hobbies," one teacher had said once, "but don't expect too much from it." Those words didn't discourage her. They fueled her determination. She began to understand that if she truly wanted to fly, she had to work harder than anyone else. Her journey toward the sky was not smooth. When she turned 18, she applied to flight school. She had saved every penny from odd jobs, delivering newspapers, babysitting, helping in her father's workshop, to pay for the application. When she walked into the office for her interview, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The instructors looked at her critically, scanning her like a puzzle they couldn't solve. She answered every question confidently, explained her experience with small engines and mechanics, and talked about her understanding of aerodynamics. Yet after the interview, she was called back for another meeting. The mood in the room was tense, almost clinical. One of the senior instructors leaned back in his chair and looked at her steadily. "We don't think this is the right path for you," he said slowly. "Flying combat planes isn't for everyone. It requires strength, nerves of steel, and quick decision-making under pressure. We don't see it here." She felt the words hit her chest like a physical weight. For a moment, she thought the ground might give way beneath her. Could it be true? Could the dream she had nurtured for years be impossible? She tried to hide her shock, forcing a polite smile. But inside, a storm was raging. Walking out of the office, the world felt different. The streets of her town seemed smaller. The clouds above seemed farther away. She wandered aimlessly, letting her thoughts swirl. Every memory of her childhood, every plane she had watched in awe, every hour spent learning and practicing flashed before her. She had come so far, yet now someone had told her she wasn't good enough. The doubt crept in, whispering that maybe they were right. Maybe she was too ordinary. Maybe she didn't have what it took, but she couldn't give up. Giving up wasn't part of her nature. She remembered her father's words from years ago, as he had tightened a bolt on a small engine she was helping him with. "It's not about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you get back up. You'll find your way if you keep going." Those words echoed in her mind, steady and grounding. She made a decision in that moment. She would not let anyone else define her limits. If they said she couldn't fly, she would show them why they were wrong. The next weeks were difficult. She returned to her small apartment, studied flight manuals, and practiced simulations on an old flight program she had saved on her laptop. Every evening, she ran through maneuvers, learning the controls, testing her reflexes, imagining the roar of the engines and the vibrations under her hands. It wasn't easy. Sometimes she failed repeatedly, her simulated planes crashing in ways that frustrated her. But she didn't let failure break her spirit. Each mistake became a lesson, each crash a teacher. Slowly, she began to feel a rhythm, a connection to the machines she had long admired from afar. Her training was not just technical. She had to strengthen her body too. Flight wasn't just about skill with instruments. It demanded physical endurance and control. She began waking up before dawn to run through fields, carrying weights, doing exercises that pushed her stamina. People in her town began to notice the change. The quiet woman who had seemed ordinary was now running faster, lifting heavier and moving with a confidence that was impossible to miss. Some neighbors whispered about her determination. Others shook their heads thinking she was wasting her time, but she didn't care about the whispers. Her eyes were set on the sky. One day she returned to the flight school for a routine check-in. She had spent months preparing, and though she was nervous, she carried herself with a quiet confidence. The instructors were surprised to see her return so determined. They had not expected her to come back. "I know what you said before," she said firmly, looking them in the eye. "But I am not giving up. I want another chance." There was silence. The room was heavy with skepticism, but she didn't back down. She spoke about her months of practice, her understanding of mechanics, her physical preparation, and her readiness to prove herself in real flight. Her voice was steady, her passion undeniable. They finally agreed to let her attempt another assessment. The day of the test arrived. Her hand shook slightly as she climbed into the cockpit for the first real trial. The plane was larger, more powerful than she had imagined. As the engines roared to life, her heart raced. She felt the vibrations under her fingers, the smell of fuel, the rush of air against the canopy. Then with a deep breath, she lifted off. At first, it was terrifying. Every movement, every control demanded total focus. But gradually, she found a flow. The plane responded to her commands like an extension of her body. She soared, looped, and maneuvered with precision. The instructors watched, initially critical, then quietly impressed. When the flight ended, she stepped out of the cockpit, heart pounding but triumphant. She had done it. She had proven, at least to herself, that she belonged in the sky. The instructors nodded, some with grudging respect, others with silent admiration. It wasn't just about flying. It was about courage, determination, and refusing to let others define her limits. That day marked the first real step toward her dream. Though the road ahead was still long and filled with challenges, she now knew one truth. She could fly, and nothing could stop her if she refused to give in to doubt. Evenings in her small apartment became moments of reflection. She would sit by the window, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange as the sun set, imagining the places she would go, the missions she would undertake, and the lives she might touch from the cockpit of her plane. Each star in the night sky felt like a promise. The path would be hard and the challenges greater than anything she had faced, but she was ready. She understood that dreams were not merely wishes. They were battles fought with persistence, courage, and belief in oneself. Her story in that small town was quietly inspiring. Neighbors and friends began to talk about her determination. Some laughed at the thought of a simple, quiet woman flying combat planes, but others quietly cheered for her, hoping that her courage might remind them that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. And though she remained humble, never seeking the spotlight, there was a quiet pride in her eyes, a knowledge that she had faced doubt, fear, and rejection, and had refused to let them define her. This was the beginning of her journey, the moment when a simple woman refused to accept no as an answer, and the first step toward the incredible challenges and heroic acts that awaited her. The sky, vast and endless, was now her home, and she was ready to rise not just for herself but for the lives she would one day protect. After proving herself in the small training planes, she felt a surge of hope. But she also knew that the real test was still ahead. The A-10 Thunderbolt, often called the Warthog, was not a gentle plane. It was loud, powerful, and built for combat. Its reputation was legendary for its ability to take hits and protect the pilot, while delivering devastating firepower. The thought of flying it both excited and scared her. Every day she reviewed manuals and studied the aircraft, learning every dial, every lever, every control. She memorized the sounds of the engines, the way the wings would respond to shifts in wind, and how to operate the weapon system safely. Her small apartment became filled with diagrams, notes, and model planes. Sleep was often minimal because her mind was constantly running, imagining scenarios, planning for challenges she might face. When the day came for her first A-10 orientation, her hands trembled slightly. She stood in front of the massive jet on the runway, staring up at its gray, armored body. It seemed almost alive, as if it knew the responsibility it carried. Her instructors were waiting nearby, skeptical but curious to see how she would handle it. "This plane is not forgiving," one of them said, his tone serious. "One wrong move and it can be very dangerous." "Are you sure you are ready?" She nodded, her jaw firm. She had waited for this moment for years, and she was not going to back down. Climbing into the cockpit for the first time was overwhelming. The seat felt high and commanding, the canopy above her almost like a glass shield over the world. The controls were complex, far more intricate than anything she had practiced with before. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that fear was normal. She remembered the lessons from her small training planes. Start slow, focus, trust yourself, and take one step at a time. As the engines roared to life, a vibration went through her body. She could feel the power of the plane beneath her, a force that demanded respect and attention. Her first flight was mostly about learning the basics: takeoff, straight flight, turns, and landing. The instructors watched closely, occasionally shouting corrections over the radio. At first, her movements were tentative, cautious. The plane was heavy and powerful, and even a small error could be costly. But slowly, she began to understand the rhythm. She learned how to read the instruments without hesitation, how to anticipate the plane's response before it happened. She realized that flying the A-10 was not about brute force. It was about patience, awareness, and precise control. By the time she landed, her hands were sore and her mind exhausted. But a sense of accomplishment filled her. She had survived the first real challenge and had begun to earn the respect of her instructors. In the following weeks, the training intensified. She learned complex maneuvers, high-speed turns, and how to fly in various weather conditions. She spent hours in flight simulators, practicing emergency procedures, engine failures, and rapid evasive actions. Each session pushed her limits physically and mentally. There were moments when frustration overwhelmed her. Sometimes the plane would not respond as expected, or a maneuver would go wrong. She would sit alone afterward, taking deep breaths, replaying the mistakes in her mind and figuring out how to correct them. She knew that real missions would be far more demanding, and she refused to allow errors to take her confidence. Her instructors began to notice something different about her. She did not panic under pressure like many pilots did. She analyzed situations calmly and made decisions quickly yet carefully. She could stay focused even when the simulator alarms were blaring, or the plane seemed to be responding unpredictably. Slowly, the skepticism in their eyes softened. They began to see that she had a natural intuition for flying, a sense of timing and control that could not be taught. Her quiet confidence became her strength, and even though she rarely spoke unless necessary, her actions proved her skill. One afternoon, she was assigned to practice a more advanced tactical scenario. The simulation involved navigating through rough terrain, identifying targets, and responding to unexpected threats. Her heart raced as she entered the cockpit, remembering that this exercise was a test not just of skill but of courage. As the simulation began, she guided the plane through valleys and over ridges, carefully monitoring altitude, speed, and fuel levels. Suddenly, multiple alarms went off. Enemy fire was simulated to hit her from unexpected angles. Her instincts kicked in. She adjusted the throttle, banked the plane sharply, and kept her focus on the objective. By the end of the exercise, she had successfully completed the mission, impressing even the toughest instructor. "You have a rare ability to stay calm and act decisively," he said. "That is what separates good pilots from exceptional ones." Despite the progress, doubt occasionally crept in. At night, she would lie awake, questioning whether she could handle the real responsibilities of combat flying. What if she made a mistake? What if she failed someone who was counting on her? These thoughts haunted her, but she did not let them dominate her. She turned fear into preparation, using it as motivation to study more, train harder, and anticipate every possible scenario. Slowly, she began to realize that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Each flight built her confidence, each successful maneuver strengthened her belief that she could rise to any challenge. Her life began to revolve entirely around the plane and the training. Friends in town saw less of her, and weekends were spent not in leisure but in reading, running, or working on flight simulations. She became more disciplined than ever, waking before dawn, practicing exercises, and reviewing flight logs. Her body grew stronger, her reflexes sharper, and her mind more alert. She was no longer just a quiet woman from a small town. She was becoming a pilot capable of handling one of the most demanding aircraft in the world. One of the most challenging parts of training was learning to manage the plane's weapons systems. The A-10 could carry an impressive array of armaments, and she had to understand every aspect of them. How to aim, how to fire safely, and how to make split-second decisions in combat. The training involved countless simulations and drills, each one teaching her more about the plane and herself. She learned how to remain calm when systems failed or alarms sounded, how to trust her instincts when time was critical, and how to make decisions that could save lives. Every success boosted her confidence, and every mistake became a lesson she would never forget. Her determination did not go unnoticed by her peers either. Some of the more experienced pilots began to respect her, approaching her for advice or to discuss strategies. Others remained skeptical, but even they could not ignore her skill. She became known for her quiet efficiency and her ability to stay composed under pressure. The plane no longer felt like a machine. It felt like an extension of her body, a partner she could trust. She began to see that flying was not just about technical knowledge or physical ability. It was about understanding herself, her limits, and her strengths. Months of relentless training passed, and the day came for her first real mission preparation. Although it was still a practice operation, it involved multiple aircraft coordination with ground forces and a complex scenario that required precision and leadership. She felt the familiar mix of excitement and nerves. Standing next to her plane, she ran through the checklist methodically, double-checking every system. Her instructors watched silently, knowing this was the moment to see how far she had come. As she climbed into the cockpit, she felt a surge of determination. She was ready to prove once again that the doubts and skepticism of others did not define her abilities. As the engines roared to life, she felt the power of the A-10 beneath her. The plane responded to every command with precision. She followed the mission plan carefully, communicating with the team, adjusting her position as needed, and navigating the simulated threats. The flight was intense, testing every skill she had learned, but she remained focused, confident, and in control. When the mission ended successfully, the instructors nodded in approval, and even the most skeptical pilots offered rare words of praise. She had earned her place among them, not by proving others wrong, but by proving to herself that she was capable of greatness. That night, she looked out at the sky from her small apartment window, reflecting on the journey so far. She remembered the doubts, the rejections, and the long hours of preparation. She thought about the fire she had carried inside her since childhood, and how it had guided her through every challenge. She realized that the journey was far from over. Real missions, real dangers, and real responsibilities lay ahead. But she also knew that she had become stronger, wiser, and more determined. The sky was no longer just a dream. It was a calling, a place where she had begun to discover the true extent of her courage and skill. She understood that the A-10 was more than a plane. It was a responsibility, a partner, and a symbol of the lives she could protect. And as she drifted into a rare, peaceful sleep, she knew that the next challenge would come soon. She would face it with the same determination that had brought her this far, ready to rise above fear, doubt, and any obstacle. Her journey had begun, and the world above was waiting for her to take flight. The day arrived when her training would be tested in a real operation. It was not a simple exercise, not a simulation she could reset if something went wrong. This time, the mission was real, and the stakes were higher than anything she had faced before. A unit of soldiers had become trapped behind enemy lines, unable to move without risking their lives. Communications were shaky, the terrain was rough, and every passing minute increased the danger. The commanders were tense, debating the risks of sending air support. She knew that once she volunteered, there would be no turning back. When she approached her plane that morning, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft orange and pink hues. The A-10 looked massive and imposing, yet familiar. She had spent months learning every detail of it, and now it was time to put that knowledge to the ultimate test. She ran through the checklist with methodical precision, double-checking every control, every system, every instrument. The ground crew gave her nods of encouragement, their confidence in her growing from the countless hours of training they had observed. Her heart beat fast, but her mind was calm. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. Climbing into the cockpit, she felt the familiar vibration of the engines, a mix of power and reassurance. As she taxied down the runway, she remembered the long nights studying, the endless simulations, the exhausting drills. All of it had led to this point. Taking off, she lifted smoothly into the sky, the ground falling away beneath her as the vast expanse of clouds opened up above. The landscape below seemed peaceful. Unaware of the danger that awaited, she focused entirely on the mission ahead, visualizing the trapped soldiers and the path she would take to reach them. The terrain was treacherous. Hills, forests, and rocky outcrops made navigation difficult, and the threat of enemy fire was constant. She kept her eyes sharp, scanning for danger while keeping the radio open to communicate with ground forces. Every move had to be calculated. A wrong turn, a moment of hesitation, or an unplanned maneuver could cost lives. Her training kicked in automatically. She adjusted the plane's speed, altitude, and angle with careful precision, feeling every vibration, every shift in wind, as if the plane itself was guiding her. The radio crackled with updates from the soldiers on the ground. They were pinned down, low on supplies, and their morale was fragile. She spoke to them calmly, giving instructions, encouragement, and reassurance. "Hold your position," she said. "We are coming. Stay low and stay ready. I'm right above you." Her voice carried authority yet comfort, letting them know someone was watching over them, someone who would not let them face this danger alone. Every word mattered. Every decision mattered. Lives were not just statistics, they were people with hopes, fears, and families waiting for them back home. As she approached the area, enemy fire began. The A-10 shook slightly as bullets and missiles aimed at her plane, testing her skill and nerve. She remained composed, using evasive maneuvers she had practiced countless times. The plane responded perfectly, her hands and feet moving instinctively, almost as if she and the machine were one. She guided the aircraft closer to the trapped soldiers, identifying targets with precise calculation. Each strike she made was deliberate, neutralizing threats without causing unnecessary damage to the surrounding area. Her focus was absolute. She could see the soldiers moving, carefully advancing behind cover, taking advantage of every opening she provided. Her heart surged with determination. She knew that each decision she made could be the difference between life and death. She coordinated with the ground team, timing attacks perfectly to give them a chance to escape. The radio chatter was constant, sometimes panicked, sometimes tense, but she kept her voice calm, guiding, directing, and reassuring. She was not just flying a plane, she was orchestrating a rescue, a dance of precision and courage against impossible odds. Hours seemed to stretch into minutes and minutes into seconds. Every moment was intense. Enemy fire intensified as the soldiers advanced, but she remained focused. She adjusted her strategy on the fly, changing altitude, speed, and angle to provide optimal cover. She targeted threats that could have ambushed the soldiers, carefully planning each move to avoid any misstep. Her hands were sore, her muscles tense, but her mind was sharper than ever. She understood that panic could not exist here. Only clarity, precision, and calm could save the lives she was responsible for. At one point, the situation became critical. A group of soldiers was trapped behind a ridge, exposed to fire from multiple directions. She could see them crouched low, their movements slow and careful, each second dangerous. She adjusted the plane's position, using the A-10's agility to suppress enemy positions while keeping the aircraft stable. Her actions created just enough cover for the soldiers to crawl to safety. She felt a mix of relief and urgency. There was no time to rest. The mission was not complete until every single one of them was safe. The terrain grew more complex, with dense forests and rocky outcrops that could hide unseen dangers. She had to rely not just on instruments but on intuition, on years of observation, and on the bond she had developed with the plane. Every maneuver required absolute trust between pilot and machine. The soldiers moved cautiously, following her guidance while she provided cover from above. The tension was immense, yet a strange rhythm developed. She moved, they moved. She struck, they advanced. She was part of a chain of life-saving actions, each link critical to the success of the mission. Throughout the operation, she felt a deep connection to the soldiers. She did not know their names, but she could imagine their lives, their families, the fear in their eyes, and the hope they clung to. Every decision she made was driven by a desire to bring them home safely. Her training had prepared her for flying, for controlling the plane, for executing maneuvers, but it was courage, empathy, and determination that guided her actions now. She realized that being a pilot was not just about skill. It was about responsibility, humanity, and commitment to others. As the hours passed, the soldiers began to reach safer positions. One by one, they moved behind cover, regrouped, and advanced toward extraction points. She coordinated every move, providing cover fire, neutralizing threats, and guiding them through the most dangerous parts of the terrain. Her focus never wavered. She was aware of the plane beneath her, the wind around her, and the lives depending on every decision she made. The intensity of the moment was exhausting yet exhilarating. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before, fully aware that courage and skill could literally save lives. Finally, the last group of soldiers reached the designated safe zone. She circled above, keeping watch until she could confirm that all 47 men were accounted for and moving toward extraction. Relief washed over her, mingled with a quiet exhaustion. She had accomplished something incredible, not for recognition, not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do. She had taken the training, the fear, the doubt, and transformed them into action that saved lives. Every maneuver, every strike, every decision had mattered. She had faced the impossible and succeeded. As she flew back to base, the sky seemed brighter, calmer, almost celebrating the success of the mission. Her body was sore, her mind exhausted, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She thought of the soldiers she had protected, imagining them returning to their families alive because of her actions. The realization was overwhelming. She had done more than fly a plane. She had made a difference, touched lives, and proven to herself that she was capable of extraordinary courage. Back at the base, the debriefing was intense. Commanders and instructors praised her skill, precision, and bravery. She remained humble, focusing on the teamwork, the coordination, and the resilience of the soldiers. Yet the recognition was undeniable. She had completed her first real mission under extreme conditions, and all 47 soldiers were safe. It was a triumph born from years of preparation, determination, and unwavering belief in herself. That night, alone in her quarters, she reflected on the day's events. The danger, the fear, the adrenaline, it all came together in a way that left her both drained and inspired. She realized that her journey was far from over. There would be more missions, more challenges, and more lives that might depend on her skill and courage. But for now, she allowed herself a moment to feel pride, to honor the quiet strength that had carried her through every obstacle. She knew that she had truly begun to understand what it meant to be a pilot, a protector, and a force for life in the midst of danger. The mission had changed her. She was no longer just a woman who had been doubted, no longer just someone striving to prove herself. She had become someone who could face fear, take action, and make a tangible difference. Her relationship with the A-10 had evolved from familiarity to trust, from skill to partnership. She understood that flying was not just a dream. It was a responsibility, a calling, and a mission that demanded everything she had to give. Looking at the stars that night, she remembered the little girl who had dreamed of the sky from her small town. That girl would be amazed, yet proud, to see what she had become. She had faced doubt, fear, and impossible odds, and she had risen above them. And though the challenges ahead were unknown, she knew one thing with certainty. She was ready to face T. The sky that day was unforgiving. Clouds hung low and the wind shifted in ways that made flying difficult, even for a seasoned pilot. She climbed into the cockpit of the A-10, feeling the familiar vibration of the engines beneath her, and ran through the checklist one last time. Her mind was focused, alert, and ready. Today's mission was critical. The soldiers were still under threat, and every second mattered. She understood that this flight would test every skill she had acquired, every lesson she had learned, and every ounce of courage she possessed. There would be no room for error. As she soared above the rugged terrain, she scanned the ground below, watching for movement, for signs of danger, and for any opportunity to help. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. The radio crackled with the voices of the soldiers, tense but determined. They were pinned down near a ridge that was difficult to reach, exposed to enemy fire from multiple angles. Her voice came over the radio, calm but commanding. "Stay low. Move slowly. I've got your cover. Trust my signal and stay in position." Every word was measured, intended to guide them safely through the danger that surrounded them. The first threats came quickly. Enemy fire erupted from the trees and rocky outcrops. Bullets struck near the plane, shaking it slightly but never destabilizing it. She maneuvered with precision, using every skill she had learned in training. The A-10 responded flawlessly, its heavy armor protecting her as she positioned the plane to provide cover fire for the soldiers below. Each movement had to be exact. Too close and she risked hitting her own team. Too far and the soldiers would be exposed. She had to judge distances, angles, and timing perfectly, and she did so with a steady hand and a clear mind. As she engaged the targets, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her. These were not simulations or drills. Every decision, every strike could mean the difference between life and death. She remembered her training, the countless hours spent preparing for this moment, and she relied on instinct as much as skill. Her eyes scanned the terrain constantly, identifying threats and eliminating them with careful precision. She felt a strange connection to the soldiers on the ground, even though she had never met them personally. They were relying on her, trusting her to guide them to safety, and she would not fail. The soldiers began to move cautiously, taking advantage of the cover she provided. Each step was dangerous, each second critical. She guided them over the radio, instructing when to move and when to pause. 2 steps forward, stop, wait for my signal. Her voice was calm, steady, and confident, and it gave them the courage to keep moving. She could see the relief on their faces as they followed her directions, but she knew the danger was far from over. The enemy was relentless, and every move forward would be met with resistance. At one point, a sudden burst of fire struck dangerously close to one of the soldiers. Without hesitation, she adjusted the plane's position, swooping down to suppress the threat and give the soldier time to move to safety. The adrenaline surged through her, but she remained composed. Every decision was deliberate, every action calculated. She felt the immense power of the A-10 beneath her hands, and she used it with careful precision. The plane was not just a machine. It was a partner, a tool, and a shield. Together they moved through the danger, each complementing the other's strengths. The terrain became more challenging as the soldiers advanced. They had to cross a narrow pass flanked by cliffs and exposed to enemy fire. She positioned the A-10 above the ridge, using its firepower to neutralize threats and create a safe path. Her fingers moved with practiced ease across the controls, firing precisely where needed, ensuring that no one was hit. The soldiers advanced slowly but steadily, trusting her guidance completely. She felt a deep sense of responsibility for each life, each step, and each decision. Hours passed like minutes as the rescue operation continued. The soldiers moved closer to safety, but the enemy adapted, finding new ways to challenge them. She remained focused, adjusting strategies, repositioning the plane, and providing continuous support. Her communication with the ground team was constant, offering instructions, reassurance, and encouragement. Keep moving. You're doing great. Almost there. Stay low, stay covered. Her calm presence was a lifeline, giving the soldiers the strength to keep going even when fear threatened to paralyze them. One particularly dangerous moment came when a group of soldiers was caught in a crossfire between 2 enemy positions. The situation was critical. She had to act quickly to prevent casualties. She adjusted the A-10's altitude and angle, targeting the threats with precision while maintaining a safe distance from the soldiers. Her hands moved instinctively, guided by training and intuition. The enemy fire subsided, and the soldiers seized the opportunity to advance. Relief mixed with tension as she continued to monitor every move, knowing that any mistake could be catastrophic. Throughout the mission, she remained aware of the environment around her. The wind shifted, clouds obscured visibility, and the rugged terrain posed constant challenges. She adjusted continuously, using her knowledge of the plane and the landscape to maintain control and effectiveness. Her focus was absolute. She was not just a pilot executing maneuvers. She was a protector, a guardian, and a lifeline for the soldiers below. The responsibility weighed heavily, but it also gave her strength and clarity. As the soldiers neared the extraction point, the enemy launched one final, desperate attack. They fired rapidly, hoping to prevent the rescue. She responded without hesitation, guiding the A-10 to suppress the fire while maintaining a safe altitude. Every shot had to be precise, every maneuver deliberate. The plane moved as an extension of her body, responding perfectly to every command. She felt a sense of harmony, a unity between pilot and machine, and it gave her the confidence to face the threat head-on. The soldiers pressed forward, using the cover she provided. Her voice guided them through the last stretch, calm, firm, and reassuring. Almost there. Keep moving. You're safe now. Trust my signal. One by one, they reached the safe zone, exhausted, tense, but alive. Relief surged through her, mixing with exhaustion, pride, and gratitude. She had done it. Every life she had guided was now safe. 47 soldiers, all alive thanks to her skill, determination, and courage. Circling above to ensure no one was left behind, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The tension of the past hours began to fade, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. She had faced danger head-on and succeeded. The mission had tested everything she had learned, every ounce of skill, courage, and resilience she possessed. It had been grueling, exhausting, and intense, but she had emerged triumphant. She had transformed training into action, preparation into results, and determination into life-saving impact. As she flew back to base, the adrenaline gradually ebbed, replaced by reflection. She thought about the soldiers, their courage, and the trust they had placed in her. She thought about the training, the long nights, the doubts, and the perseverance that had brought her to this moment. The sky around her seemed vast and endless, a reminder of the freedom she had earned and the responsibility she now carried. She understood more clearly than ever that being a pilot was not just about flying. It was about leadership, courage, and the ability to make a difference when it mattered most. Landing at the base, she was met by commanders, instructors, and members of the ground team. Their expressions showed a mix of relief, respect, and awe. She stepped out of the cockpit, exhausted but composed, acknowledging the team without seeking attention. The praise was meaningful, but she remained focused on the fact that the mission had succeeded because of coordination, trust, and the courage of everyone involved. She had done her part, but she knew that every soldier, every team member, and every small decision had played a critical role in the success of the operation. That evening, in the quiet of her quarters, she reflected on the day's events. The fear, the tension, and the danger had been overwhelming, yet she had discovered something profound about herself. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to act despite it. Leadership was not about authority. It was about responsibility, trust, and empathy. And skill alone was not enough. It was the combination of preparation, intuition, and humanity that made a difference. She had experienced all of these truths firsthand, and they had changed her forever. She thought back to the little girl who had dreamed of the sky from a small town, imagining herself flying above the clouds. That girl would have been amazed at what had been accomplished today, at the lives saved and the courage demonstrated. She realized that every challenge, every doubt, every obstacle she had faced had been necessary to prepare her for this moment. And though more challenges would come, she knew she was ready to meet them with the same determination, skill, and heart that had guided her through this mission. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, she felt a quiet sense of pride and purpose. The mission had been completed. The soldiers were safe, and the sky above her was vast and inviting, filled with endless possibilities. She knew that her journey was far from over, that greater challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and resilience to face them. The A-10, once just a powerful machine, had become a partner and a symbol of her hobby.